Clay doesn't misbehave on its own. Gardeners force it into failure. The most common mistake is treating clay like a drainage problem when it's actually a structure problem. That mistake guarantees two extremes: flooding when it's wet and cracking when it dries. You end up drowning roots in spring and tearing them apart in summer, then wondering why yields never stabilize. I learned this the hard way on heavy clay that puddled after light rain and split open like concrete by August. I tried deeper watering, raised beds, sand, gypsum, tillage, and even aggressive drainage. Nothing stopped the cycle. What finally worked was fixing how clay is held together, not how fast water moves through it. If you care about growing food instead of fighting soil every season, subscribe now. This channel is about practical fixes that hold up year after year. Clay floods and cracks because it loses structure, not because it holds too much water. Clay particles are incredibly good at holding water. That's their strength. The problem is, what happens when those particles aren't aggregated? When structure collapses, water can't enter fast enough during rain, so it floods. When it dries, the particles shrink and pull apart, so it cracks. I tested this across beds with identical clay but different management. Where soil was disturbed and left bare, flooding and cracking were guaranteed. Where structure was protected, water soaked in and stayed available without extreme swings. Most fixes target symptoms and make the cycle worse over time. Tilling feels helpful because it loosens soil temporarily. But every pass destroys aggregates and exposes clay to sealing. Sand seems logical until you watch it turn clay into brick. Raised beds help only until the surface breaks down and the clay beneath stays sealed. Even heavy mulches fail if there's no biological activity underneath holding particles together. I've used all of these. They provide short relief and long damage. The real fix is stable aggregation, and that only comes from biology. Aggregates are clusters of clay, silt, and organic matter bound together by microbial glues. When aggregates are stable, water enters quickly, drains slowly, and stays available. When they collapse, everything goes wrong. I stopped trying to improve drainage and started feeding organisms that build aggregates. That changed everything. Stopping flooding starts at the surface, not deep in the soil. Flooding begins when the soil's surface seals. Once sealed, water has nowhere to go but sideways. I fixed this by building a living surface layer instead of exposing bare clay. In practical terms, I laid down about 1 inch of shredded dry carbon like leaves or cardboard, followed by roughly ½ an inch of green material. I watered it thoroughly and covered it with a light mulch to hold moisture. I didn't mix it in. I didn't till. Within weeks, the surface stopped sealing and water infiltration improved dramatically. Stopping cracking requires keeping aggregates intact through dry periods. Cracking happens when clay dries without internal support. Aggregates act like shock absorbers. They hold moisture and resist shrinkage. After one full season of surface feeding, cracks that used to open 2 inches wide became shallow hairlines or disappeared entirely. The soil stayed friable deeper into dry weather because organic bonds held particles together and slowed moisture loss. Moisture consistency matters more than total water applied. In clay, wet-dry extremes are more damaging than absolute dryness. I stopped deep, infrequent soaking and switched to moderate, regular watering once structure began forming. The goal wasn't saturation, it was stability. With improved aggregation, clay held water longer, so I watered less often overall. Plants showed fewer stress signals and maintained steady growth instead of boom and bust cycles. Calcium helps only when biology is already active. Calcium supports aggregation by bridging clay particles, but it's not a cure on its own. I applied gypsum at about 1 to 2 pounds per 100 square feet, where tests showed low calcium. It helped, but only in beds already receiving surface carbon. Gypsum without carbon changed almost nothing. Calcium strengthens structure that biology builds. It doesn't create it. Raised beds don't fix clay unless you fix the interface. Raised beds often flood or dry out for the same reason native clay does. The interface between bed and ground seals, trapping water above and starving roots below. I fix this by treating raised beds the same way as ground beds. Surface carbon, no disturbance, steady moisture. Roots cross the boundary once structure formed and water stopped pooling in the beds. Hydroponic systems taught me the same lesson in a different language. In hydroponics, systems that are constantly flushed and adjusted behave just like disturbed clay. They swing wildly. Systems with biological buffering and stable carbon inputs behave predictably. When I reduced disturbance and added low levels of humic substances, around 20 to 30 parts per million, pH and nutrient uptake stabilized. Different medium, same rule. Structure and buffering prevent extremes. This approach trades instant fixes for permanent improvement. You won't stop flooding and cracking in a week. The first season is about building structure. The payoff is that each year gets easier instead of harder. After 2 years, my clay stopped behaving like a problem soil. It absorbed heavy rain, stayed workable longer in dry weather, and supported deeper root systems than lighter soils nearby. Clay isn't broken, it's unfinished. Clay is one of the most fertile soil types when managed correctly. It just needs structure. Feed the surface, protect moisture, leave aggregates alone. When you stop fighting clay and start supporting it, the flooding and cracking solve themselves. If this helped you see clay differently, subscribe to Easy Garden Life. Share this with someone still battling puddles and fissures every season. Better food starts with soil that stays balanced, and balance comes from understanding how soil actually works.